All right, great. Well, thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate the invitation, and thank you all for coming. Today, I'm going to be talking about bringing new life to old devices, how to put your previous Macs and iDevices to work. First, I just want to start a little bit about me. I live in Michigan with my wife and two daughters. These are them here, Alana and Lily. I've used a Mac ever since I was 7 years old. My parents brought home a Mac 512K in 1985. And so that ever since then, I've just been a fanatic. Since 2002, I've been developing apps for the Mac, the iPhone, the iPad, and the Apple TV. The first app I started working on a long time ago was XRG. It's like a little system monitor tool. I released it for free. It's open source, everything. It wasn't my job at the time, and it was just something that I enjoyed to do. I still maintain that app today. And have fun, enjoy doing that just as a side project. But my primary apps is the Seasonality family of weather apps. This one I have a version for the Mac, and that's been out since 2005. And I also have a version for the iPhone and the iPad. The iPad version is pretty unique because you can rearrange the weather exactly the way you want to see it. And so that's kind of something that sets it apart. And then I even have professional a weather app called Seasonality Pro. This one's more geared towards meteorologists. It shows model data, and it's very customizable, exactly how you want to display things. And so those are all apps that I've been working on for several years, and I enjoy doing that. Outside of work, I enjoy photography, mountain biking, and traveling. This picture was taken in Pismo Beach, California. I have a family in California where I grew up. But we're not necessarily here to talk about me today. We're here to talk about bringing life to your old devices. So let's get started with that. So maybe you just bought an M1 Mac or a shiny new iPad or iPhone. What do you do with your old Mac? How do you make use of it or repurpose it, or what are your options? You don't want it just sitting on a shelf because that's obviously not a great way to go out. So here's some things you can do. One, you can trade it into Apple. As far as trade-in costs, I mean, they change all the time when new models come out, but I mean, here's some examples of prices you expect when you trade in an old Mac. They also will take old iPads and as well as iPhones. And I believe when you trade it into Apple, it basically will give you they'll give you a store credit. And so typically what you want to do is you want to trade it in as you're purchasing the new device. But that can't always be the case if you want to have some overlap or so forth. I know for phones, actually, they do give you some overlap. If you're purchasing the new phone, like you can get, I think they'll ship you the new model, and then you can then go ahead and have a couple of weeks to transition to the new device and then send them the old device back. But they give you the credit for that, and you can apply it to a new purchase for Apple products. And that's a nice way to go. Your old device gets new use, it gets refurbished and sold to a new customer or recycled. Other options are like you could donate it. You could donate it to a local school or library. Community centers like to have the extra equipment. If you have a local homeless shelter, or day shelter, you can donate it there, and people there could use it to help find jobs and so forth. Or you can donate it to a friend or family member. Say, I mean, a student that is starting high school or college, and you have somebody in your family, you know, somebody in that situation, then an older Mac or iPad can definitely help in that kind of situation. But those are all great, but what if you still want to use it? And so if you want to continue using the old device, then let's talk about some ways that you can make use of those devices. And I'm going to start by talking about the Mac, and I'll move on to iOS devices later in this talk. So I wanted to say that I'm not talking about if you have a Mac like this vintage. These Macs are great. I mean, the SE30 is one of my favorite Macs ever, but that's something that is more applicable to be placed in a museum somewhere. Not necessarily, it's not necessarily useful on your current network, or even if you can get it on your current network to do anything with it. I'm talking about something more recent, something a Mac that maybe was manufactured within the last 10 years or so. It doesn't have to be the latest and greatest, but it should still be able to be online and so forth, and run at a reasonable speed that it can be a useful tool. So that's, I mean, iMacs, I mean, pretty much any Intel a Mac would be in this situation. So what do you need? I recommend, if you're gonna repurpose an old Mac, I think you need something, it should be something that is wired to your internet connection. A lot of these things, when you are sharing services on an older Mac or on any Mac, you want to have the fastest connection available. And so if you do have something like this is an airport base station, if you have a network there, then that would be a good way to go if you can plug it right in. You can certainly do this over Wi-Fi as well. Just make sure that the device is as close as possible to your base station, and so it's relatively quick. So most of these ideas are based on somehow sharing services of the old device, and so let's talk about sharing. Sharing is in your system preferences, and so this is one of, if you launch your system preferences, you can notice that there is a sharing item right there. You can also use the search box and type in any of this sharing in that search box, and it will highlight that for you and quickly select it if you're having trouble finding it. Now, once you click on the sharing tab, you'll see something like this. And this screen here is basically where you configure anything that you want this particular Mac to share. I wanted to point out the first thing you want to do is give your computer a name. And I think by default it says it's your name's MacBook Pro or your name's iMac would show up there. But it can be a little fun to kind of create a unique name for it to call that computer. And so it makes it easier for you to refer to it. This particular computer in the screenshot is named Carbon. It's a MacBook Pro. And the reason I called it Carbon was because I bought it's just like it's a screen protector that goes on the back on the outside of the laptop, and it had a carbon pattern on it, like a little hexagonal pattern. And I kind of like that, so I call it Carbon. But you can name it anything you want. Now, on the one side, on the left side of the of this system preference, you have a list of ways that you can share out services from this computer. And so anything that's checked there are services that are active, and anything unchecked obviously isn't active in that case. And you click on each one to kind of dive into the details of what each of those entail. And so that's basically what, when we talk about it, is going through a few of these items here that are that you might not know about, that are actually fairly useful to have on your local network. And so actually, I'm going to stop right here and ask if there's any questions so far once before I dive into this.
Dave McGuire, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you. My question was, as far as donating older equipment to people, would you agree that donating a computer that is more than 10 years old may not be a good idea?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, there are places that take older equipment, and I mean, I know here in Michigan, actually, they were shipping, collecting older equipment and sending it to other countries as well. And so it depends, because depending on where you donate it, if it's something where it's so old, maybe something's not quite working right with it, then it can also be used as, if somebody's learning a trade like computer repair, it can be used as in a kind of a course to practice that, to teach that skill. As far as donating it to a person, it just depends on how useful it is. I mean, there's a big difference between a 10-year-old MacBook Air with maybe 2 gigs of memory and a 10-year-old iMac that might have 16 gigs of memory. And the iMac in that case is going to have a lot longer shelf life because it was a higher end machine to begin with.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. I've known a lot of people that want to pass on a computer maybe to a family member, and the limiting feature sometimes is the software on that device, as well as, like you stated, it doesn't have enough memory to, up and keep moving with things. And I found that a lot of people would have an older machine that Safari can't handle going to their banking site. And so, unfortunately, while the machine itself is physically fine, the software just can't handle that one step up to still have, usefulness in that category, since most people their online lives are a lot more than it used to be. So thank you very much for your answer.
Sure.
All right, all yours, Mike.
Okay, great. So so I'll move on and give a quick warning here on enabling any of these items for sharing. And that is to be careful when you do something like share with a laptop. Now, it's one thing if say you're using a MacBook and you want to use sharing on it, and if that MacBook is always going to be on your home network, then you don't have to worry about that. But if it's a laptop that you still use occasionally, or still maybe if you're going to like a coffee shop or something, maybe you have an old MacBook, but then you have a new iMac, but hey, you're going to go to a coffee shop, why don't you grab the laptop and take it with you? Before you leave your home network with that laptop, you definitely want to disable all of these items again, because otherwise you're opening yourself up for other people to make use of these services. And so that's just what I'll start with that to say, hey, just careful before you leave home with a laptop with sharing on, make sure you disable these services and then re-enable them when you get home. Now, screen sharing. The first thing you want to enable is screen sharing. And this is because once screen sharing is enabled, you don't need to worry about being at the old Mac in order to use it. And this is especially great for computers like a Mac Mini or Mac Pro that don't have monitors hooked up to them normally anyway. I mean, a monitor is an optional peripheral for them. And so if you say you have a Mac Mini, you can tuck it away in a corner and still make use of it without having a full computer set up there. So screen sharing is the first item in the list. All you have to do is check the box and it will be enabled, and it will show you in the list of how you can get to it. So once it's enabled on one computer, if you go to your newest Mac, you can see it in the list in the Finder window on the left-hand side. There's a locations list, and all the computers on your network should be listed there. And so this particular computer that I'm sharing is Jarvis, and you can go in and say connect as in the upper right corner. You can type in your username and password. I think I have a password that's pretty common with all those dots there. But anyway, type in your password to log in, and then what you want to click on remember this password in my keychain, because there's something where you're going to be connecting to it, maybe daily, maybe weekly, but either way, it's inconvenient to have to remember or continually type in your password for something that's shared on your local network. And you can kind of think of it as just like an extra computer next to your computer that you're using. Once you do that, you are connected, and this computer has a file sharing enabled as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but you'll notice again in the upper right corner, there's a share screen button. And if you click on that, you will get a window on your desktop of your new Mac showing your old Mac. And from that point on, you can use your old Mac just as if you were sitting in front of it, and change other settings as well. And so screen sharing really is a good first step of what you want to have working before you start configuring some of these other items. Let's move on to Time Machine. Time Machine, I think, is
Mike,
a more...
Mike,
Sure.
can we pause for a second? I have a question about sharing from Melissa Green. Melissa, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I liked your idea about a laptop that might travel. Could I have two logins on that laptop, and one for logging in when it's at home and a different one for when I'm logging in at the coffee shop or the library?
You can have a multiple login, and if you want to do something, I mean, where you're applying saving a password for screen sharing and so forth, to only use the login. But I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here, if one person configures the sharing to share, say, have file sharing enabled, then even if that user isn't logged in and you're logged into a second user account, that file sharing is still enabled, because the sharing system settings are just that. They're system-wide settings. They're not based on per user.
Okay, thank you.
You cannot set up a per user system-wide setting?
I don't believe so. I think I mean, for file sharing, there might be an option to select which users you want to be able to log into file sharing. Mm-hmm. But if that is enabled, then you're still sharing is still listening on the network for the other user to log in.
I see. All right. Thank you. Great. Mm-hmm. All yours.
Great. So yeah, let's move on to Time Machine. Time Machine is really handy. If you haven't set up Time Machine before, you should definitely give it a shot. All you do is plug in an external drive, click the box that you want to back up, and it automatically backs up your entire Mac to that external drive. Where Time Machine becomes a little bit of a hassle is that when you have, say, a laptop, and that laptop kind of floats around your house a little bit, you might not always remember to plug in the backup drive. So one thing that Time Machine can do is you can back up to a Mac that that is on your network. And so the idea here is to use your old Mac as the Time Machine destination for all your other Macs. And this isn't just one. I mean, say you can just buy one big hard drive that uses a backup drive, and everybody in the household can back up their data to that one Mac. So you don't have to buy separate drives for each computer. So let me show how to do that. Again, we go to our friend, the sharing system preference panel, and you check the box next to file sharing. And when the file sharing is selected, it will show this screen on the right-hand side. And you'll notice the list of shared folders. Now, usually when file sharing is enabled, it will, and you log into a file share, you can see your home directory. So say you have your home directory on your old Mac, by default will show up as something that you can see on your new Mac. But the shared folder lists are additional folders that you might want to add. And so for Time Machine, we're going to add an additional shared folder. And to do that, you just click the plus button on the bottom of that panel. Now, from here, it's going to show you a Finder dialog box that just basically allows you to navigate to the place on your disk that you want to store Time Machine backups. Now, I would recommend this be an external drive because Time Machine likes to absorb as much space as possible. There is a way to limit the space. I'll show that in the next couple of slides, but it's going to be a lot easier if you have an external drive. You can just let the Time Machine backups use the available space. But regardless, once you're on a spot where you want to store the backups, click this new folder button, name your new folder Time Machine backups, or whatever you want. And that will show up in the list. You select that and then click the add button. So now your Time Machine backups show up in a folder that's shared. And so if somebody connects to your old Mac, they'll be able to see that folder as a shared folder. But there's one additional step we want to go through here. And that is to right click or control click on that folder and go to advanced options in the menu. That brings up this dialog box. And from there, you can say, determine whether you want to allow guest users and so forth. But the checkbox near the bottom, the share as a Time Machine backup destination, that's the one you want to check. This is what's going to tell other Macs on your network that, hey, Time Machine can use this folder as a backup destination. And like I said before, you can limit the backups to say 500 gigs or whatever's appropriate for the amount of data you have. But if it's on an external drive, you can have it use the whole disk and leave that box unchecked. So that switching, that was all done in the sharing system preferences of the old Mac. Now you need to go on to your new Mac and go under system preferences again. And this time you're going to go to Time Machine on the new Mac. And from here, you'll be able to, one, check the backup automatically box to make sure the backups will be running, and then hit the select disk button. And you'll notice that once you hit the select disk button, it'll pop this up and it will show local drives, but it will also show Time Machine backups that's on your on your old Mac. You can select that and select use disk, and you're good to go. So that's basically how you set it up. Then you can see It will do its initial backup, which will take a long time because it's going over the network, but additional backups afterwards go relatively quickly. Are there any questions about Time Machine?
Give me 1 second. You got a lot of questions about everything else.
I have a question on Time Machine.
Please, okay, go ahead.
I had to stop using it. I found it slow and very unstable, a lot of errors. A lot of times I had to totally reconnect it, and especially with NAS. So I'm using third-party software that works with the NAS, and I don't have an issue. And I've tried Time Machine 3 times over the last, I want to say 5 years, where all right, let's try it again, see if it works. So it's failed with Netgear NAS, it's failed with Synology NAS. And maybe that's just my experience, but it doesn't appear to be stable to me.
Okay, yeah, and so I've noticed stability issues when backing up to a NAS device. So it's more frequent when I've noticed it not being as reliable when you're backing up a laptop, because it might be in the middle of a backup and you shut your computer or disconnect from the network somehow, and then all of a sudden Time Machine is just like, oh wait, now I can't finish my backup, and then somehow a lot of times I'll go back and it will detect when that happens and recover from it. It depends though. What I have noticed though is that I haven't had a lot of issues like that with a disk that's directly connected to the Mac. I've also had better luck when backing up to another Mac on the network, just because Apple is configuring it in a way that it knows that it's something that they would test when they're doing testing of their new OSs. And so in my experiences, it's been okay with backing up to another Mac. Now, I also have a Synology box, and it's something where I figure, I mean, maybe every 6 months to a year, it will say, hey, you need to back up or start a new backup again. And I guess I'll select that and give it a day to do it, you know? But yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point that if you back up over the network, it's not going to be as reliable as a backup disk that's plugged directly into your Mac. So there is that drawback. But if you're a person that often forgets to plug in the backup disk, then it's a lot better than not having a backup of your recent files.
Okay, Dave McGuire, you care to comment on that, on this?
In my experience, and everyone's is different, but in my experience, Time Machine wasn't designed for NAS devices. It just wasn't. Yes, it can work, but there's a big emphasis on the can rather than will. It's always been my advice to people to use an external drive just for your Time Machine rather than, you know, dealing with the headache that, you know, the other guy had deal with NAS devices. If you've got a spare hard drive, which are super economical these days, you can just plug it in and forget about it as long as you've got the space on the system to plug it in. And it just seems like it's more headache than it's worth for trying to get the NASs to always stick with Time Machine because of whatever hiccup happens. So that's just my advice. That's all. So
All right,
thank you.
Thank you. Alan Weinstein, do you have a question? Unmute yourself and ask your question.
I have a question again, going back to screen sharing. My iMac has a very large screen, and if I buy a new MacBook Air or whatever, I was going to buy the 11-inch. So rather than play my old Mac on the 11-inch screen, is there a way for me to play my new Mac on my big iMac screen? In other words, go the other way.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it both ways. of course, on the MacBook Air, you'd again have to be concerned that when you take it out of your household, you want to disable that screen sharing. But there's nothing keeping you from doing that. It's not as great of a user experience though. So, I mean, assuming that you want to be using the enhanced capability of the new Mac, and you're going to be leaning toward doing that, in that kind of situation, it's almost better to just have an external monitor that you plug that Mac into at a desk if you want a bigger screen on the new MacBook Air.
Right. And let me add that when you do a screen share, it will not take over your entire screen. It opens up a window that you can only resize so far.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And
my 11-inch iMac, my 11-inch MacBook Air would only show 11 inches on my other. It wouldn't blow that 11 inches up to expand.
No.
The whole
No.
the whole monitor size.
No,
only 11
no.
inches?
No, it will not.
No. Well,
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct. So it'll only show up as an 11-inch screen on your other Mac. And so it's often better to have it use the Mac with a larger screen to look at a Mac with a smaller screen because it's in a window there. But you can go the other way around too. Occasionally I'll use it if I have my laptop and my desktop. And if I'm on my laptop after work and I just want to do something quickly on my desktop downstairs, but I don't want to actually go back to the office, I work at home. Then what I'll do is I'll just do screen sharing down, and my desktop here has a bigger monitor, of course, but the screen sharing window, if you resize it, it has an option to scale it smaller or to turn it into a scrollable window. So you can configure that to whatever you prefer.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, Mike, all yours.
Thank you. So yeah, the next thing I was going to cover is file sharing, and we've already kind of done this, but file sharing might be if you want to add another folder in there that's a shared folder. Say it's something you want to share with all the members of your household, and you just want to put some files in there, kind of like a Dropbox shared folder. But this would be local and quick, and your data does not leave your house. So with this, you just have to add another folder to your shared folder list and name it anything you want. And then anybody who is in your house can connect to that device on your old Mac and view the files that way. And so that's just really handy. Again, by default, your home directory is shared out. And that's great for personal use. But if you want multiple people to be able to see that shared folder and use it, then you can select that here. And I guess it's fair to mention that to the right of that list is the list of users that can make use of that folder. And so if you select that, if you want somebody else to be able to use that folder, go ahead and click the plus button below there to add another user to that list that can access that. To get to a shared folder, if you're in the Finder on your new Mac, you can go to the Go menu and select Network. And from there, all your computers on your network will show up on that list. And as well as, like I've mentioned before, it will also show up under the locations on the left side of a Finder window as well. But they will show up in this network list where you can double click on one of them and see what shared folders are offered from that Mac. And so this shared files that we just added on the old device is showing up on the new Mac as a folder that you can open up over the network. So that's how you use file sharing across the network. I'm going to go on to content caching. This one is not a lot of people know about it, but it's really a handy tool that that you can use. And the idea with content caching is that you can save your internet connection from having to transfer a bunch of data twice or 3 times or more. So content caching is at the bottom of the list of the sharing system preferences. And the idea here is that when a new software update comes out, or if a new app update comes out on an app that you have installed, or a lot of other content that I'll get to shortly, you might have 2 or 3 Macs at home that are going to be downloading and installing the software update. And if you didn't have content caching, each one of those Macs would have to download that update from Apple and then install that update from Apple. With content caching on your old Mac, if you have that enabled, the old Mac will download that software update for you. And then you download the software update from the other Macs. Your other Macs will connect to the old Mac to get the software update. And this is all done behind the scenes. There is no interface other than checking that box. Like, you check the box and there's very few options. And your other Macs on your network automatically see that there is a content cache on your network, and they will talk to your old Mac and figure out what needs to happen there. This is great because, again, it saves time. You only download a software update once. With new software updates can be several gigabytes. And it also works with iTunes or iCloud related content. And so if you're if say you have a personal iCloud account that you have a couple of Macs signed in, and your photos library is hosted on iCloud and so forth, then this content cache works with that as well. So all your photos and stuff, or any recent photo, would probably be in the cache here. And then when you open up, say, your phone, it only needs to grab the latest photo from the cache on your local network, instead of going out and connecting to Apple and downloading it, which would take longer. Now, there is something to do here with the options on the old Mac. I don't think I show it here, but if you click that options button, it will let you configure again how much space you want to use on the old Mac for the cache. Because caching, again, just like backups, it's going to take up as much space as possible. And you certainly want to do this if you're using the built-in hard drive. It's less of an issue if you're using an external hard drive as the cache. But again, limit the amount of space it's going to take so you don't fill your disk. Bad things happen when that happens. And this is just, again, it's easy to set up, and it's really has a big benefit to any device on your network. So is there any questions on content caching or file sharing?
Yes. Does content caching need to be turned on all the Macs that are connected?
That's a good question. No, it does not. It just needs to be turned on the Mac that is actually caching the data. And so it's something you configure only on the old Mac. And you might have to restart the other Macs on the network for it to see that cache. I'm not sure, or just go into sleep mode. I don't know if there is something that needs to happen. But otherwise, the other Macs will just notice that there's a cache there and automatically use it.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so let's move on to media sharing. Now, this is less of an issue now because so much of our media is hosted in iTunes. But if you do have media on your own network, say you have music that you've like if you have a CD library that you've copied music from, and you have that content on your local Mac, you can copy that over to keep that on your old Mac and share it out to other devices in your home. Now, to do that, you check this box for media sharing, again, in the sharing system preferences. You can name your library, and basically you make use of home sharing. And this will share out to anybody who's on your network and be able to play your music, your movies, and your TV shows that you have on your old Mac. And where this comes in most most benefit is actually because on the Apple TV, you can view this content, and it's an easy way to get to that content. In order to do that, you have to go into settings on your Apple TV and go under users and accounts. And at the very bottom, there's an option to select home sharing. I don't think I show it here, but it will basically show you all the options on your network of what shares are available, and your old Mac will show up there depending on what library name you give it there. That will show up under that setting on your Apple TV. Okay. So once you do that, then when you're on your Apple TV, you go to an app called Computers. And it's this orange one here in the third row. And when you open that, it will show basically all the movies, TV shows, and music that are on your other Mac. Now, this is true too. Say you do have like most of these are movies that were purchased off to iTunes. And you can go through and download them to your Mac using the TV app on your Mac. And so that way, if you're going to stream it to your Apple TV, again, it's going to be saving your network connection. It's not going to be going over the internet to get to Apple servers to watch the movie. It's just going to use it locally. And that comes in handy, especially if you have a slow internet connection and you're playing a high def movie. Maybe if you streamed it from Apple, it wouldn't be fast enough. You'd start seeing a lower resolution version of it. With this, it's coming just from a local computer, so it's going to be fast. You can also do this media sharing not only on Apple TV, but on any of your iOS devices. And so on the left-hand side here, this is Apple Music on the Music app, and home sharing shows up as a list in your library there, and it will let you play music that's on your local Mac. On the right side here, this is the TV app on your phone. And again, your library will show up where you can select items, TV shows and movies and stuff that are on your old Mac that are being shared out. And so those are the sharing options that I'm going to be talking about today. There was one last thing that I wanted to bring up, and that's as you can use the old Mac as a peripheral hub, as a way to kind of clean up your desk. So our desk gets lots of clutter on it sometimes, and I don't know about you, but for me, I like having a clean desk. It helps me focus better, not to have a bunch of devices sitting around. And so I have an older Mac here. This is a 2013 Mac Pro that is no longer my main desktop Mac, but I have other things like here you can see a picture. It's a document scanner, and I don't necessarily want to have the document scanner on my desk all the time. And so the idea here is that I have the Mac Pro. It's in a corner somewhere, and I can hook up the document scanner to the Mac Pro, and I can use the document scanner just like I would if it was connected to my main Mac. And then go in with screen sharing and file sharing to get the documents that I scan to that Mac. And so that's just another option. I mean, a document scanner is just one item here, but if there are other things that you hook up to your Mac that you feel like you don't necessarily need to have on your desk, then go ahead and plug it into the second Mac and just use it from there using screen sharing. So that's, yeah, I'm going to move on to iPad, but are there any questions about anything I've talked about on the Mac side? I guess if that's good, then I'm gonna go ahead and move on. So for the iPad, it's a little bit different. With an iPad, you have options, a lot of options, because there's so many apps available for the iPad. The one thing that I like using an iPad for or another room I like using it in is the kitchen. And this is something you gotta kind of be a little bit careful, because there are liquids in the kitchen, and you want to protect your device and make sure that it doesn't get damaged by that. But assuming that you can handle that, it's a great kitchen helper. So I throw recipes in there occasionally, and you can go to the App Store, and if you search for recipe, there's a ton of apps. I mean, there's thousands of them. Epicurious is one that has been around for a long time. That one's fairly popular, but you can pick one that fits to your needs really well. A lot of them have different features and so forth. But if you don't want to if you don't want to have a separate app to track your recipes, or if you haven't found anything that quite fits your needs, you could always just use Notes. Notes, if you're connected with iCloud, it's all shared between all your accounts. And so you can create a folder called recipes in your Notes app, and just go ahead and add all the recipes for the items into that list. Now you might think, well, it's going to be a pain to go through and type in all my recipes. I mean, that's a lot of work, even if you did it on your Mac and just shared that to your iPad through iCloud. But there's an easier way. iPads often have cameras on them, and if you click the little camera button, you can choose the take photo or video option, and use your camera to actually grab a photo out of a recipe book. So this is my household's favorite fondue recipe. Definitely take a screen cap if give it a shot if you like, especially if you like Greer. And so you take the picture, it pulls it into Notes, and it's already there. And with later versions of iOS, you can even use the text recognition on it, and to copy the text and so forth. But that's a real handy way to get a recipe into your Notes app very quickly, and keep track of all of them in your kitchen, so that you don't have to go hunting through recipe books to find what you're looking for. Now, I use it also as a kitchen TV. So if there's one chore that my wife and I both cannot stand, it's doing the dishes. And I don't know why, but some people doing dishes is relaxing and so forth. But to me, it's just like, how can I get this done as fast as possible? And having an iPad as a TV is one way that just makes it so much more bearable. And so you can use like this is the Spectrum app if you have a TV connection or subscription through a local cable provider. You can use that. Oftentimes they'll have an app, or if you have Netflix or Hulu or any of the other subscription areas, here's YouTube. You can catch up on all the any NMUG meetings that you happen to miss. You can catch up on the YouTube channel and watch it while you're doing the dishes. And so it makes things go by so much quicker. And I'll talk about stands and so forth and protector for the iPad later on. Moving to other rooms of the house, it's a nice photo frame. You saw these photo frames in the stores, and it felt like either there were inexpensive frames that didn't quite show that good a quality of pictures, or they're really expensive to buy a digital photo frame that's like a real nice quality one.
Mike, may I interrupt you for just a second? I noticed that we seem to have lost our moderator, Sheeta. I don't see her. And I also see that some people have raised their hands to ask questions, perhaps related to the previous subject. So I just wanted to interrupt quickly to make sure that our audience gets satisfied. Sheeta, are you back on?
I'm only back on my iPhone. I've completely lost internet at my home. So
Okay.
I really cannot, there's some things that I can't see right now.
But I do.
So,
Okay,
yeah,
so
please handle
I
it.
will jump in then, Sheila.
Go ahead.
And I think there's Jim Corsica. You've raised your hand, and please unmute yourself and ask a question. And then after Jim, there's John Buckley, who's also wanted to ask a question.
Okay, this is great because yeah, I was a little wondering why there wasn't anything after the Mac section. So this is great. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Hi, Mike. A next door neighbor was a visitor from France, and he left me his laptop. It's an older laptop, and I've thought of using it in some, subordinate way, but I want to know, he didn't do anything in terms of deactivating ownership. I'm not sure I'm putting this correctly, but you know what I mean? Is there anything I can do to completely wipe that laptop clean? I think its biggest software was Snow Leopard. And is there any way that I can wipe that laptop clean and make it start out like it's a new laptop that I can use for the kind of purposes that you're talking about?
Yeah, so going into depth on this would be beyond the scope of this talk, but yes, there is a way to do that. If you don't care about any of the data on there and just want to completely wipe it and start fresh, what you want to do, there's a couple of steps. One, you want to make sure if Find My Mac is enabled, you want to make sure you disable that because that's a security mechanism for Macs that gets stolen. I don't think it will let you wipe it unless you disable that first. And so that's done through the iCloud system preferences. After you disable Find My Mac on the neighbor's account, then what you would have to do then is restart that Mac and go into the system recovery. And you do that by restarting and holding down Command R on your keyboard. And that will load up a recovery where you'll have the option to install a fresh version of Mac OS. And so you would follow the steps along that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I thought it was hopeless.
Jim, do you have the ability?
Actually, you shouldn't install the fresh version of the OS until you formatted the drive.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you can do that in the same recovery menu. You can, yeah, that's a good call out. You want to definitely want to format the disk first and then install the OS onto the newly formatted disk.
All right.
Sheeta, I think you're back on. Would you like to take over as moderator? I think John Buckley would like to ask a question.
Sure, go ahead. Let me try that. And John, go ahead and ask your question.
Back when you were talking about backing up to the old computer, and also when you were talking about sharing something, so I can connect an old hard drive to the old computer to use that for doing backups, an external hard drive?
Yes. Yes. And so if you certainly if you're going to do backups or file sharing, then the best option there, I think, is to have an external hard drive that you plug into the old Mac. And that can be a hard drive that you already own. And if you have something there where you'd like to make use of that again, then that's a good option as well.
Yeah, because I have a large NAS hard drive, but it's come to the end of use as far as Western Digital's stuff. And they say I can still use that to as a regular hard drive. And I can connect it to my old laptop that I have.
Yeah, it sounds like that'd be a perfect use for it because, and I mean, presumably the Mac would be a lot faster accessing those files over the network than the Western Digital device was. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
All right, in my absence, did Michael Tolper, are you still here, Michael?
Yes, I am here, Cheetah.
Michael had a very interesting question that I want you to get to and answer. Michael, can you please ask your question?
Sure. My question was, if I retired like a 2014 Mac and I wanted to screen share it on a newer Mac, the 2014 Mac had a Fusion drive, and you can only upgrade, I don't know what it was, High Sierra, I think. And so my question is, if I screen shared it on the new Mac, looking at the older Mac, would I then be able to run all the programs in that older Mac, even though I'm now on a newer Mac? How's that for confusion?
No, that's exactly, yeah. And it's one of those things actually that I should have included in this talk because it is such a, it's such a good use for it. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because you're doing screen sharing to the old Mac, you're using that old Mac as if you were on that version of the OS. And so if you have old apps that might not work on your new Mac, that is a great way to continue to take advantage of them and use them from your new computer by screen sharing back.
Terrific. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Would there be any instance where screen sharing would not work for that?
Like I said, I mean, there's some drawbacks with using a computer through screen sharing. I mean, the mouse movement isn't quite as fluid as you're used to on your local computer. Some things like mission control, like if you use gestures on your trackpad to start mission control, if you do that when you're screen sharing, it's going to go to your current Mac that you're on and not to the old Mac. And so if you want to use something like that on the old Mac, you're going to have to add the mission control app to your dock and use it that way and not use it with gestures.
I guess what I'm specifically asking is, if I have I have a old titanium that I use, and every once in a while it comes in handy because there are older files that can't be opened by the newer system. And if I have screen sharing turned on that titanium, will I be able to access it with my M1 or my Intel and still be able to use it? So I guess that's what I'm asking there.
Yeah, I believe there should not be any issue there. So I do not know how far back. I mean, screen sharing has been an option in the system preferences for a long time. And I believe they've used the same protocol. I don't think the protocol's changed. And so that should work fairly far back in the lineup of Macs. You would definitely need to be on OS 10. But I don't know. It'd be, I'll leave it to the exercise of the reader or the watcher to get, like, I don't know, OS 10, 10.1 Puma or something on screen sharing on an M1 Mac.
I'll do it and let you know. All right, great. All right, James Cutler, you have a question.
Oh, it's actually a comment. The oldest date that I can give you is whatever Mac OS version ran on a, was it 17-inch laptop? One that a lot of people loved and Apple discontinued. That's the oldest one that I've routinely connected to from newer versions. But they all share a common underlying protocol, which is the VNC protocol, which is primarily oriented to and in some cases file transfer. That's what Apple's screen sharing is built on. And I have saved myself hundreds of miles of driving
Right.
using screen sharing since sometime last century.
Okay.
And
All right.
and they doesn't matter the version. So
All
anyway,
right. Thank you.
I
All
hope
right.
that
Thank
helped.
you. It did. Thank you, Jim. Joan Newman, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you, Cheetah. My question is, if you're screen sharing to an old Mac that has old.
Okay, hold on. Joan, I lost you.
Yeah.
Joan, are you still there? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Will those old apps on your old computer work as they do on your old computer or your new computer? In other words, one of the reasons you get a new computer is because your old computer is slowed up. So how will they work on the new computer? Will they work the same way?
Yeah, so that's the thing. For better or for worse, the screen sharing will only show what it would behave like as if you were using the old Mac.
So you might as well plug it in and use it then.
Yeah,
really?
I mean, if it's using apps, if there's apps there that aren't on your that aren't compatible with your new Mac, it's a great way to continue using those apps. At the same time, though, if you're doing something on your old Mac, you're going to be still limited to the capabilities of that Mac as well. So
gotcha.
There's a give and take there. But yes, the screen sharing is as if you have the screen of your old Mac in a window on your new Mac. And so it's going to behave exactly as it did on the old Mac.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, all yours, Mike.
Okay, well, yeah. And so I had, there's a few ways to use the iPad in the kitchen. But with the photo frame, really, I mean, the iPad has such a nice quality screen to begin with that you can use it as a photo frame. And the best way to do this is to create an album in Photos. So you open up the Photos app, create an album, drag a bunch of pictures to it. This is an album that I created. We had a trip to Washington, D.C. A few years ago. And then you tap on that three dotted button in the upper right-hand corner there. And when you tap on that, it brings up this panel. And one of the options here at the bottom is a slideshow. If you select that, you can actually then get a slideshow with animated transitions between the frames and so forth. There are different options that you can select for the slideshow, different transitions, even music if you wanted to. But this is a great way to show your favorite photos on an iPad screen that you might just have in a living room or something.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
I have this exact setup. I have an old iPad G3. It is a tank. It is slower than all get out. It can't be used for anything. And anytime I make a shared photo album, even on my newer computers, it shows up on this older iPad. So I can still share and do this slideshow of my images, no matter when I've taken these images.
Yeah, that's a great point because I mean that's the thing is that I mean showing photos is one of the things even the original iPad was built for, you know, and so it just really excels at doing that. And so especially if you're using something like this where you have nothing else to use it for, you have a new iPad that you use all the time. It's a great way to use it. Thanks for the support there.
Sure, no problem. All right, any other questions? All right, all yours, Mike.
Okay, so another thing that you can use an old iPad for, or phone for that matter, is as a webcam monitor, and that's to keep an eye on things around your household. Sometimes some people will have webcams at different spots of their house, doorbell cameras, and so forth. And you can use the apps, just keep them open on the old device and be able to keep an eye on that. this app here, I think, is UfiCam for that brand of webcams. But there's also, and that's what's shown here. I just have one just pointing out of my office window, and I can keep track of things while we're gone. But there's also, like, if you have a Synology, a NAS, and you have use the cameras for that, then you can have multiple cameras feeding data into the NAS and use their app to have like a grid of cameras. And you could just leave that in your bedroom at night to check things over before you go to bed. And so it's something where it's really handy. You don't have to necessarily use your new device for that. You can keep it on all the time to keep an eye on things using your old device. And okay, the next one is a family calendar. So this is for when, I mean, COVID's limited a lot of the stuff that we can do, but when things finally do get back to normal, you can use this as a way to keep track of what your family activity is. The best way to do this is actually to have, with iCloud, you can have a shared account. Or if you can select other members, other iCloud account, like, so you have multiple iCloud accounts. You have one iCloud account for each person, but you can group them together as a family and have a shared family calendar in that group. And so if anybody puts an item on the family calendar, you can have an iPad sitting somewhere, maybe, especially if there's mounts you can get that like are magnetic, you could stick it to your refrigerator. And then have your family calendar on the fridge that automatically updates whenever anybody adds something to it. And so that's really kind of handy to do. And again, for the kitchen where like everything happens, I mean, that's one way to really bring data together into that room. So are there any questions up to that point on those two?
I don't see any on those two.
Okay.
Baxter Thomason, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, the Mac that you are sharing, kind of your earlier discussion, you have to worry about it going to sleep, or you have to change the settings on it, or keep the cover open?
Yeah, so if you have yeah, that's you bring up a very good point. So yeah, and in the energy settings and system preferences, you're going to want to make sure you disable sleep mode and so forth, and have it so that when it's plugged in all the time. The other tip I can provide there is that a laptop will stay awake as long as there's the monitor hooked up to it. And I know I said that the whole idea is to use screen sharing instead of having a monitor. But if you want to have a laptop just sitting somewhere on a shelf and use it from there, they actually make these little HDMI dongles they're just little plugs. They look like tiny flash drives. But if you plug that into the HDMI port or to a dongle with any kind of monitor port that you have available on your laptop, then it behaves as though a monitor is connected, even though there's not really one there. And so I have one of these that I plug into my laptop. It's shut, but it still stays on and is usable that way.
Okay, and then the other question, if I'm using it for Time Machine remotely, do I also do a Time Machine on that local shared device, and just as a backup every once in a while, or be like two Time Machines?
Yeah, you could. I mean, and that speaks to how much risk you want to take. There was a comment earlier in the talk about how backing up over the network might not be as reliable. And so if you want to maintain those two, like a local backup and a network backup, you can of course do that in that in the dialog where you select disk, you can select multiple disks, and what Time Machine will do, and this works whether you have 2 backup disks plugged in your Mac or you're using a local disk and a network disk. It works for both, but it will do every hour it does a backup, and so it will just switch between each hour, and you'll have a full backup between both of them.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Sure.
all yours, Mike.
And so I'll give the one last thing, as you can use it as a weather dashboard, a shameless plug for using seasonality. And so you can set up your seasonality dashboard on your iPad and have a nice weather screen there, and it will continue to update as time goes on. So so that's another option. Let's talk about hardware you might need. If you're going to use something, you want a good stand. You don't want to just lay your device on a table. There's some real nice ones. It really depends on what your room decor is like. In a kitchen, oftentimes you see a lot of bamboo, and so if you look for an iPad kitchen stand and type in bamboo as well, you'll get something like this. They're not that expensive, and you can just lean it on there. That doesn't give you any kind of liquid protection, though. Something like this, if you search for iPad waterproof, you can get a thing like this where you have that extra layer if something spills on it and so forth. And a lot of these, I believe you still have access to the screen, the touch screen, of course, while it's in the container. It's almost like it's as if it was in a bag. And so there's definitely options out there, especially, I mean, I typed this on Amazon and there was just hundreds of them. And so the idea is I mean, just find what works best for your room. This one here I have actually for my desk, because oftentimes I'm an app developer, and so a lot of times I'll run an app on my phone, and I don't want to keep picking it up off the desk every time. And so I have this, it's 12 South makes a high rise thing that basically just holds it up. It's really sturdy. There's a metal thing behind the phone as well to help hold it up. And so that's one option. I've even put iPads on that high rise, and assuming you don't bump it too much, it works just fine. This other one is another one I have. I'm not sure you can get these anymore, but if you do find one, it's a good product. It's put out by Belkin, and basically, again, you plug it into any kind of charging brick. But this here I have a 12-inch iPad Pro, the first generation, and I have that sitting on this device, and it holds it really, really steadily. And I have stuff displayed on there, and it's great. And so this one works, I mean, anything from phones up through iPads, but especially if you have an iPad, having a nice wide base like that is really handy.
Can we get one last question in?
Sure.
Brian Hendricks, can you unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah, well, it was more, y'all were talking about sharing the screen and how the screen wasn't the same size. I have been looking for a good solution. I work in IT, and I'm not allowed to use my home computer in my job. They want to send me the last 3 jobs, they've always wanted to send me Windows laptops. I don't work in Windows. I don't like Windows. I don't use Windows. So I finally got this employer to say, yeah, you can use a Mac, but we can't send you one, and you can't use your personal one. Well, that's part of why I was in this meeting. I wanted to find out what the solution was. I couldn't find a good RDP version, Microsoft's RDP that works with Mac to Mac, but I just tried your screen sharing. And what surprised me was, y'all said the screen doesn't get very big. It actually did. It fills the screen. It looks like I'm on it. All I had to do was hit the green round button at the top that says go to full size. And I guess that's because both Mac Minis are same screen resolution, same display board. The only difference is one is M1, one is not.
Mm-hmm.
So far this is working, and it is a little slow. The command spacebar worked. on the one I'm sharing, not on the current one. Now, if I move my cursor over to the other screen, the command space bar will work on the other one. So
we gotta wrap it up here, Brian.
all right, well, that was it. I was just saying it does go full screen, and that was worth this whole meeting. So I'll shut up.
All right, Brian, thanks you so much. We appreciate your feedback.